us out here. Our comrades from the Green Party in Maryland were very supportive and helpful. We are a small party. We are attempting to gain ballot access in Maryland, and there's a process that Maryland put in place to make it very difficult for anybody to get on the ballot and to stay on the ballot, but even harder when you're talking about poor communities, Black, Latino communities having access to do this. We are a Black workers-led electoral party. We are an anti-capitalist party. We are for social justice and economic justice for all people. We are not limited to Black people being in the party because we will be a ballot access party, but we are clear that it has class consciousness and that the leadership will be Black workers. Not very unsimilar than what you saw during the Civil Rights Movement when Black people were in the forefront of social justice transformation that everyone was engaged in. We start with a real interesting position that may be familiar to some, but not necessarily popularly talked about. Our electoral strategy starts with some understanding about what we are and what political parties are. For us, parties are instruments of class and national struggle for the interests of a class, for the interests of a nation, of people to be free, to be self-determined. We also see elections slightly different. We see them as struggles between elements of the ruling class for control of the state apparatus, right, to implement policy, economic, social, whatever it is. We see these things as struggles for power that people sometimes think are struggles between personalities or even struggles around political parties themselves. They are primarily dominated by those who believe in the domination of capital. They're dominated by white supremacist positions. And so there, as Margaret said, there's very little debate in those things. Those are accepted. Imperialism is okay. Colonialism is okay. Theft of land is okay. Those things are not in debate. You just move on and you just walk over the dead bodies of brown, red, and Black people and get on with making capital. So that's not an acceptable position for us. Now, my community is overwhelmingly supportive of the Democratic Party. We know that. And we get nothing in return for that because the boogeyman, we're often told, is the Republican Party. Luckily for us in Baltimore City, there are no Republicans that run City Hall. All the oppressive actions that come against African and working class people come out of the Democratic Party. All we have to do is explain that over and over and over and over again. Because what people are being frustrated with isn't just bad politicians. It is a position of the capitalist party called the Democratic Party that dictates these things. And so they need a real challenge, a real opposition to that. We don't need to be on the ballot to do that. And that's where we don't want to make our mistakes around the electoral question. For us, the electoral question doesn't start during the election cycle. The struggle for power starts in communities, on campuses, in prisons, on the work site. The constant work that you have to do to be able to spread ideas, organize people around their own interests, and build real unity around what we all need as human beings is what the real struggle is, and that's where power is consolidated. We want to be in a position where on the ground we have control and influence over building institutions. We want to have control and influence over what policies get enacted in City Hall. We want to be able to tell city councilmen and mayors to show up when we tell them to show up. Because if you're able to do that, elections are very different. You don't even have to win an election to have that kind of influence, right, about what the policies look like. And it challenges everything about how elections are today run. We were really interested in this discussion because we knew that labor forces would be here. And we find this to be a real interesting question for us because we kind of tipped our toe into that water about how do we have relationships with unions. And some unions, the postal union in Maryland, in Baltimore has been open. The riders, the transit union have been open, and some others. And they're not ready to commit, and we understand what that relationship is at the top. But the truth is that for us, Union members live in neighborhoods. Union members go to church. Union members have children in school. We don't have to go to a union to have influence over the rank and file of the union. All we have to do is do the work where we said we wanted to do and be able to build and influence them. They will take those politics with them into their union meetings and to be able to raise struggle. And so from that way, we understand more clearly, yes, we will have relationships when we're trying to talk to the leadership, the local leadership of the unions, but the real work is talking to the rank and file. We've been in meetings around the Fight for 15, where members of the unions differed openly in the discussion than the union leadership, siding with our position about not only do we believe that the $15 should happen now as far as implementation, but we should be talking about a livable wage, not a set $15 wage. Does $15 work in every state? Right? And that's where the discussion, and so we've been able to see that. So we think it's really important that we do this. We've had really interesting discussions about why is it, black workers led. Well, the truth is the Democratic Party is white capitalist led. Right? It's white capitalist led. It is the party that we have to remind people of. My grandparents would get killed for trying to register in. The Democratic Party is the party of the slave master in this country. In this country. You understand what I'm saying? You have to remind people what their real relationships are to their oppression. Because otherwise you leave them confused. You leave them disorganized and full of wolves of the Democratic and Republican Party to come up and take our people into madness. That is why we are very clear about who we are consciously as a class and as a national entity. We believe that it's possible to have real relationships with people who are not of African descent, based upon our shared interests. But if you want those relationships, they have to be based upon respect. They have to be based upon the changing the structural relationship that imperialism has set for us. So even though we recognize each other as workers and we understand the problems we have, you can't bring white supremacy into the meeting room and think that we can move forward. Just because you have access to resources, access to education, or whatever those accesses are that have been denied to working oppressed people, you can't come into the room and have that, and that's a non-starter. And someone has to remind you of that. Because it's not so widely understood. People don't even mean to bring that into the room, but it's there. So we have to build relationships based upon honest discussion. We have to be willing to do work. Don't just say, well, I support you. We've had many people during my election say, I support you. I said, what does that mean? Can you donate some money? Can you go out and pass out some leaflets? Because otherwise, that is cheerleading. Right? That is cheerleading. Football teams don't win games because the cheerleading is so great. You got to have somebody run some blocks. Somebody's got to be willing to catch the ball. Somebody's got to take the face in the mud so the quarterback can run over the line. That's what needs to happen if we're going to have relationships, and that's what we're moving forward. So again, just in summary, our electoral strategy has nothing to do with elections. We are hoping that in running and learning our capacity to be able to run elections, that we become much better at organizing, recruiting, building a cadre who are involved in the community. Those are where the struggle is going to be won. Those are where the strength come in. And when we run elections, those elections are products of the real work that we've been doing day after day, week after week in our communities. And the leaders that we run are people who've been produced in those struggles and have a real organic relationship to the community they serve. Thank you very much.